That's great. We can see some people flooding in.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for joining us.
Welcome. See some familiar names in the attendee list. You probably can't see the attendee list yourselves, but it's good to know that
yeah,
people are flooding in. We'll just wait a moment or two whilst everyone arrives and then kick off.
So we were just talking before we went live about the weather situation for all of us. So one of our panelists, Ayola, was saying that it's nice and sunny in Birmingham. I'm in North London and it's raining, so not so good. What's the weather like where everyone else is today? Maybe you could put it in the chat just to let us know. We can all be envious in North London. Oh, sunny, very good.
And if you want to, in the chat to all panelists and attendees, then everybody gets to see.
Sunny in Devon.
Devon, nice.
Jealous. Sunny in Lincoln. So dark and cloudy. That makes me feel better.
Oh, that's Marcus in London. Yes.
Soggy. Oh.
So maybe it is just
snowing anywhere.
Southeast that is
sunny but cloudy. Yeah. Mixed bag.
And in the Medway, Martin says we've had the rain and now the sun's out. So maybe there's some hope.
Birmingham too. Don't apologise for the sun in Birmingham.
No clouds in the sky in Liverpool. Wow.
It's quite sunny in Newbury, actually. I had to. That's why my.
Yes, it's all flooding through your window, Lina. Yeah.
Yes, I have to.
Glorious in
Liverpool.
Oh well, that's good.
It's good to.
I mean, in London, in fairness, we did have some sunshine this morning, so I don't feel completely shortchanged. But hopefully, we'll get more sunshine tomorrow. Sunny in North Yorkshire. Was it Dan? Did you say it was sunny where you are? Or
no. I've got the grey clouds that you had probably
looming
20 minutes ago, Emma. So it's heading my way.
Brilliant.
Shall
we start? Sorry, I won't talk about the weather for the whole of the webinar, I promise. Thank you for attending the session on whether it's sunny or cloudy or wherever you are today. We really appreciate you coming along today and listening to what we've got to say. My name is Emma Allman. I work for Moore Kingston Smith as a fundraising consultant. I've been in fundraising sometimes probably for longer than I care to remember, probably about 18, 19 years now, working most of my career in-house at various different hospices, also worked for a baby charity, most recently a children's mental health charity, and I've worked in corporate and community and mass participation events as well. So that's me. Dan, I don't know if you just want to quickly introduce yourself to everyone.
Sure, thank you, Emma. So I'm Dan Fletcher, as it says there. I'm director of the fundraising side of our consultancy at Moore Kingston Smith Fundraising and Management. I've been a fundraiser for even longer than Emma, slightly more grey hairs up there, and worked in different charities, including at one point the same charity as Emma, a hospice in North London, and I've been a consultant the last 10 years. But generally, I've been involved in leading different charities' fundraising activities.
Brilliant, thanks so much. And I won't ask them to introduce themselves now because that will come later, but we've got some brilliant fundraisers on the ground with us today. And we've got Ayola. I don't know if you just want to wave, Ayola, just to say hello to everyone.
Hi, everyone.
And we've got Lina. Lina's there waving too. So Ayola works at Age UK Birmingham, and Lina is from a charity called Parents and Children Together, which is abbreviated as PACT. And they will be joining us later as our guest panelists to talk about their experience with Case for Support. And they've got different angles that they're going to be coming along with in terms of what they're going to talk about. So that's us. So if you just want to, I'm going to talk about what we're going to discuss today. Dan, if you could just next slide, please. Chris Whitty, yeah. I needed to get that in. So this is the agenda for what we're going to talk about today. We're going to do a quick introduction, which is going to be led by me, just talking about what we do as an organisation. Then Dan will talk about what is a case for support, just to kind of talk through the nuts and bolts of that, and also what isn't a case for support, because there can be some misconceptions there. And also who needs to understand it. So who in your organisation needs to understand what it actually is in order to maximise income for your organisation. And then I'll talk about the content of a case for support, what goes in it, what sort of things you need to be thinking about. Then we'll look at, like I said at the beginning, we're going to have panel perspectives. So Lina and Ayola are going to talk about their unique situations with their case. And then we're going to have an open question session as well, which should last about 10 to 15 minutes. So we'll have about 30 minutes of content, panel perspectives, and then open questions. And if you do have any questions that you kind of come up in your head as the presentation is going along, then please do just pop it into the Q&A, and Dan and I will do our best to answer those questions at the end of the presentation. Also, I've just been asked to let you know the questionnaire that we would normally send out. For those of you who've been to our webinars before, we would normally send out a questionnaire at the end. You'll get an email, you'll still get that same email, and you'll get a recording of this webinar, so don't worry too much about sort of trying to write everything down, but the feedback form will pop up automatically as part of this Zoom call as well. So if you can either fill it out immediately after this session, so it's kind of out of the way, or complete it when you get the email, just with the recording of the webinar. The feedback really is important to us. We want to make sure that we're doing the best we can for you guys out there. So please do, we do really value your feedback. So we do encourage you to complete the form if you can. So that's a bit of a whistle-stop tour about in terms of what we're going to talk about today. Dan, if I could have the next slide, just so very briefly, just a little bit about Moore Kingston Smith. We are actually a predominantly, and we're an accountancy firm, and we audit a lot of the third sector, and have won various awards within the third sector, within accountancy, and we are really the top of our game in terms of that area. And in addition to the accountancy side of the firm, we have other services, which include the area that myself and Dan work for. We work for Moore Kingston Smith fundraising and management team. And we are a team that essentially what we're trying to do is really help charities, you guys out there, raise as much money as possible to ultimately help your beneficiaries. And we're able to do that in a variety of different ways. So we have a great impact team that can help organisations look at the current way that they're measuring their impact and helping hopefully improve that, potentially help improve impact data so that some of those applications you send out really stand out and help you win those bids. We've also got good financial management team who will help with things like cost recovery and building financial model reviews as well to make you as efficient as you can be. And last but not least, Dan and I work as fundraising consultants. So we help charities in a variety of different ways, which ultimately help them generate more income and make them more successful. So looking at some of the fundraising strategies, and also looking at reviewing some things that are going on and making sure that you're complying with the code of fundraising practice. So that's really what we do as a team. Dan, if we could just go on to the next slide, please. And we've got lots and lots of things coming up that you might be interested in joining. probably the most prevalent, given that everyone's here to think about fundraising. We've got a training half-day workshop happening on the 22nd of April. It's a 3-hour workshop, and it's only £99, so we think really good value for money. And the fundraising one is the 13th of May, and it's investing in your fundraising team in a post-COVID world. So if you like what you hear from us today and you're interested, please do register. We've still got some spaces going for that. We've got some the impact training. I think we're nearly at capacity for that, but if you are interested, let us know. And we've got a few other webinars coming up that are free of charge. If you wanted to join them, you can see the titles there. And on the right hand side there are some of the webinars that we've had in the past that you're more than welcome to view if it's of interest to you. So that's a little bit about what you can go to in the future and what we've had in the past. But let's get on now to what you're actually here to listen to, and it's around case for support. So if we can just go on to the next slide. Oh, Dan, this is your bit, isn't it? Sorry.
Okay, great. Thanks, Emma. So I'm just going to kick off by thinking a little bit about what a case for support is, and also what it isn't. Sometimes it's helpful to think about what things aren't in order to really understand what the key things that go into them are. And I see in the audience we've got a range of people, some fundraisers, some charity chief executives, some others involved in other elements of how charities work. And I think the case of support is something that is important for fundraisers, but it's important for everybody in a charity to really understand and to get to grips with. So hopefully the things that we talk about now will help and will resonate with gaps that you may have in your knowledge. But first of all, thinking about what a case for support is, and first of all, this isn't a case for support, this is a support for a case. So we're not going to talk about that, but we are going to talk about the fundraising cycle, which is sort of a core bit of fundraising theory. It starts off with the case of support, and then you think about your audience, then you think about making an ask to your audience, and then you think about monitoring and evaluating how well you're doing. But it starts at the top in green with case for support. And there's a reason why it starts with a case of support at the top, because it's the most important thing that you have to get right. If you don't get your case of support right, then the rest of your fundraising, the audiences that you approach may be the wrong ones. The way that you make your ask will probably be ineffective, and what you monitor and evaluate won't be very good because you won't be doing as well as you could be. So the case for support is at the core, at the heart of good fundraising, and therefore of enabling you and your charity to raise the right amount of money in order to serve the beneficiaries that you serve. So again, thinking about what isn't a case for support, there's a difference between fundraising messaging and brand marketing, and how you market your charity brand, and particularly it's important for those who are involved in communications and marketing to think about the differences in the messages that come into your fundraising case of support and the messages that go into your general brand marketing. So when it comes to fundraising, the focus is very much on the donor. It's not that other audiences aren't important, but your donor is of critical importance. If you don't reach your donor, then you're not going to be able to raise any money. Fundraising messages also articulate the issues, perhaps the problems that your charity has, and they show vulnerability. They show you things that could go wrong. If there isn't that element of jeopardy, if there isn't that element of a problem, then why would anybody want to give money in the first place? There would be no need for them to support you, because everything would be fine. And then fundraising messaging has a limited context as well, and because it's particularly focused on the donor and focused on securing a response, generally a financial response. Whereas brand marketing is much more focused on the beneficiary, on how the charity supports and helps the beneficiary. It's about articulating solutions and showing the strength of the charity. It talks about how you do things well in your charity and how you manage to get things right and make things better for your beneficiaries. And it generally will have a fuller context because it's thinking about all sorts of different audiences and all sorts of different ways of communicating with them. And then there is the bit in the middle of the Venn diagram, the shared audience, where you can be articulating issues and solutions at the same time, and you have a shared context. And those are the opportunities where perhaps you can achieve more. And in this diagram, that intersection is quite small, but ideally it might be a much larger overlap in the way your fundraising messaging and your brand marketing work together. The brand marketing helps the case of support to raise more money. The case of support helps the charity to reach a wider audience and to achieve its overall aims. And so then moving forwards, thinking about what can go wrong with a case of support. And I've listed a range of pitfalls here, things that could be problematic. I think the first one, cases crafted by committees are rarely compelling, is important to consider. It doesn't mean that your case of support shouldn't be something that engages different committees, different groups in your organisation, because it really should, and it shouldn't just be something that's left to the fundraisers and only the fundraisers think about. But trying to write it in a committee is probably never really going to work. It needs to be simple. But and it needs to also focus on, as I said, some of the problems as well as the positivity and the solutions that your charity can create. It's important to include case studies rather than just numbers, because people tend to respond better to stories about individuals, stories about humans, rather than just statistics. And it's important that you don't forget to ask. The support bit is important, or very important. Sometimes people spend so much time crafting their case of support and telling the story of the charity and how you make things so much better for your beneficiaries, you solve the problems, that actually the money side of things gets left right to the end and isn't done very well. So the ask is as important as the rest of it. And it's also important to think about who needs to be involved in the creation of the case of support and who needs to get involved in honing it. And so here's a list of just some different stakeholder groups that, as fundraisers, you may want to consider involving in your case of support creation. And I see there's some trustees on the delegate list today, and people from other parts of your charity, working in other parts of charities. You should also try to be involved in honing the case of support, providing feedback, and helping the fundraising team to get the case of support as perfect as possible. And it might be something that Lina talks about a bit later, some of the work that we did with Pact Charity and with the trustees, helping them to think through what the case of support meant for Pact. And then the last sort of bit of advice I want to give on what is a case of support is thinking about how you get others to own it, so it's not just something that sits within the fundraising team, but it is something that everybody else in the organisation and beyond the organisation can engage with. So you might want to think about bite-sized versions. A case should include everything, but you might want to have some smaller versions that people find easy to remember, and they can present sort of as a elevator pitch sort of approach. Think of ways of briefing your trustees and giving them ways that they can use the case of support, giving them examples, celebrating opportunities that they've used when that's gone well. Think about other volunteers you have in your organisation, not only your fundraising volunteers, but think about others who volunteer for your charity, and they can be advocates for presenting the case of support. They clearly like what your charity does. That's why they volunteer for you. They're supporters. They give up their time, but they can also tell the story of your charity through the case of support and encourage other people to give at the same time. And then staff and supporters should be very familiar with your case of support as well through regular use in your communications. and so whether it's people who sit at the reception desk, people who are face to face with your beneficiaries, or people who are involved in more back office things, if they know how to talk about your case of support, then that will help you as your charity to be much more successful in your fundraising. So we thought a little bit about what a case of support is, but we're going to dive down into a little bit more detail, and Emma's going to talk about the actual contents of a case of support, what goes into it. So back to you, Emma.
Thanks, Dan. So we've talked about, you know, what it is. So what's actually in this thing we call it a case for support. So I just wanted to kind of almost give you 5 elements that Dan and I think should make up a case, and different types of cases will require different levels of detail, obviously. So if it's something that's going to be going on your website, then it needs to be kind of short and catchy. But if it's a case that's being made for a trust application, then it's obviously much more detailed. But I think the point still remains that it's good to include all of these elements within a case, regardless of the size of that case. But you will embellish different parts of the case dependent on the circumstance. But it's still important to try and cover off these areas, whatever you're doing. If we just go to the next slide. Dan, do you want to go to the next slide? Sorry,
Emma, I'm trying. It's
okay. Don't worry. Oh, actually, go back. Sorry, I've moved forward after that. The first element of the case is the current situation. So this is the current situation that's specific to your cause. So for example, for a hospice, the situation might be there's an increase in people that need palliative care support, or if you're a mental health charity, it might be, for an example, an increase in depression rates amongst men if you're a mental health charity, like Calm. But regardless of the situation, it's thinking about actually how you want to almost position that situation, because there are different ways to position cases. So for example, do you want to present a good situation at the moment that you want to preserve and continue, or do you want to present more of a case of a bad situation that's going to happen in the future, and without some intervention that will come ultimately from donations, that situation's going to get a lot worse. And charities will be angling their case for support in, we think, 4 different ways, whether they know it or not. So what I wanted to do was show you a diagram which will help you consider how you want to position that your case in that current situation. So Dan, you can change now, sorry. So this is basically, everyone can see on the screen, it's a quadrant which shows 4 different ways that you can present a case for support. And we generally recommend that charities almost adopt one of these areas and stick with it, because it will just make your case more stronger with your supporters, rather than sort of dipping in and out of various different areas. So I guess what I wanted to do was talk you through the different areas and give you some examples so you can get an idea of the thought process here. So if we start with the green rectangle, which is the preserve quadrant on the top left there. So this is around saying to your donors that you've got something good at the moment, and you want to keep it that way, and you want to preserve it. So a charity, something like the National Trust that's preserving and keeping things going and wants to keep it that way, are probably going down that kind of route when they're asking for donations. If we move then to the top right, which is the Inspire area, so this is around you want to create, as a charity, you want to create a brighter future for your beneficiaries. So a charity like the NSPCC probably used this quite well with their Full Stop campaign, because that was all about stopping child cruelty in the future. So that's the kind of angle that you would be going down if you want to talk about having that positive future. And then if we move down to the bottom left, this is around actually focusing on a current negative situation. It's not good now, and we need to improve it now. So a homeless charity, something like Shelter, might use this area in terms of saying the situation with homelessness isn't good enough now, and it needs to improve now. So that's around that's the kind of area that you would be looking at if you wanted to look at focusing on the improve area. And the last area on the bottom right is future negative. So that's about prevention. So that's painting a picture of, as a charity, you're seeing bad things could happen down the track, and you want to prevent that. So environmental charities use this quite a lot, in terms of things around climate change. And if we don't make certain interventions now, then by the time we get to 2030, things will be a lot worse. So they're the four quadrants. As I said at the beginning, most charities will be using one of these, perhaps dipping their toe into two, but it's useful when you're thinking about compiling your cases, actually what's your position as a charity, where do you naturally sit, and then that will help you write down and understand what you're trying to say to your donors, but understanding what area that you want to go into is a really good place to start. So if we go, Dan, you can move to the next slide. So we've looked at the current situation, and we've looked at the kind of positioning using the quadrant. It's then useful to think about when you're compiling your case. You know what the current situation and why is that a problem, because the donor needs to know why what you're saying is an issue, and sometimes that will be really obvious, but it's worth thinking about that and thinking it through with various stakeholders. So if we go back to my example around more people requiring palliative care, it's a problem because more patients unfortunately might be passing away in more of a hospital setting where they may not always be equipped in the same way that palliative care providers are. So that's a problem in terms of the way someone passes away. In terms of the mental health charity example I gave, in terms of depression rates going up, it's a problem if that then leads on to more suicide rates in this country as well. So it's thinking about actually what's the problem given the current situation we're in, because that will make what you're saying to your donors more compelling. It is important at this point as well is we recommend charities don't then fall into the trap at this point in talking about the problem being the lack of funds to pay for it, because that's not as compelling as actually saying what the real human cost might be to some of these issues. The funding is the enabler to help you solve that problem, but it's not the problem in itself. So we're not saying don't ask for money, that's obviously very important, but try and think about the problem, the unique thing you're trying to tackle, rather than the income that you want to get in to enable you to solve the problem. And then going down this list, the next thing to think about is what's the solution to that problem. So if we go back to the hospice example, sorry, the palliative care example, the solution, given that the numbers are increasing and more people are passing away in hospital, the solution might be for more palliative care provision. So that might be around a capital appeal to build a new palliative care centre. If it's the mental health charity issue that I spoke about with the sort of depression and suicide levels, then one of the solutions might be access to more support for people that really need it, more access around kind of 24/7 counselling provisions, things like that. So think about what the unique solution is for your charity. And then it's thinking about what can your charity do to solve that problem. So in our example with the hospice one, the solution, as I sort of relayed in terms of the problem, is that it can be perhaps building a new palliative care centre, or for CALM or a mental health charity, it's around providing more counselling provision in the form of a 24/7 telephone service. So this is all hypothetical, by the way. I'm not suggesting these charities need to do this, but it's just an example of working through how you tackle these problems. And what you can talk about actually when you're talking about what your charity can do, you can always evidence what your charity is already doing or what it has done in order to help with that problem. And that interlinks nicely with us talking about impact. So Dan, I don't know if you can move on to the next slide for me. When we're talking about impact, I mean, a really good way of a charity articulating what they've done is to talk about specifically the impact they've made. And the point I wanted to make with this slide is charities often fall into the trap of talking about outputs rather than outcomes. So I've got an example there of an output statement. So we organise this, everyone can read it, but we organise a series of events that 60 students attended and designed to help with their independence, versus the outcome example of what's actually been achieved by what they've done. And hopefully that demonstrates actually those outcome examples are much more compelling, and they're evidence-based, and donors are going to be much more motivated in actual change created and statistics rather than outputs of how many people that you've supported. So thinking about how you can describe that will make your case, we think, much more compelling. And I wanted to give you an example of that, just looking at what our impact team worked with a provider called Orpheus, and I just wanted to I guess talk through an example of how that can work really well. So we have a team that are specialists in impact, and they were able to work with the charity and actually came up with lots of outcome examples of just in terms of the difference that service made. So just to rewind a little bit, Orpheus is a college for young adults with learning and physical disabilities, and it's just designed to help them grow as people and live independent lives. So if any of you saw the documentary that Katie Price did on BBC One a little while ago, I think it was just before Christmas, when she was trying to find somewhere for her young adult son, Harvey, to go to in the next stage of his life. Orpheus was somewhere they went to have a look at. The impact team really helped them in terms of coming up with some good outcomes in terms of what the outcomes that they were doing to really make a difference to some of these young people's lives. So you can see there on the diagram, working with them in terms of one outcome leads to another, and what that actually ends up meaning in terms of the difference to an individual's life. And they also are able to look at the outcomes from a perspective of other people in the individual's lives as well. So, things like the parent of the individual and their friends, and the difference that the scheme made to them. And they're also the team were also able to quantify the social value of that. So they calculated that every £1 spent made a difference of £2.15 was gained back in social value too. So it really made a difference to them, and it actually meant that as a charity they were able to reapply for funding via the National Lottery that they were previously rejected for, just because they weren't demonstrating those outputs well enough. But thanks to what we were able to do for them, they were able to successfully win that funding. So it's just demonstrating really how being able to show your prospective donors the difference you're making, really can make a difference to the income that can come to your charity. Dan, I don't know if you can move on. So we've done those 4 bits, and the last bit was really around call to action. So that's obviously really important. People need to understand what you need them to do in order to generate the impact that you're trying to make. So that is the piece within Case for Support, where you can ask for a financial contribution to the charity. And that bit needs some focus as well. So don't spend all your time casing a really beautiful case and then not asking people to donate to you. That bit's really important too. So I hope that's helpful in terms of giving everyone a bit of a whistle-stop tour around what a Case for Support can look like. Just thinking about those 5 key elements, the quadrants that I spoke about, and also the importance of some of that impact data. We're now actually going to move on and have a chat with our panelists. So we've got Lina and Ayola, who are hopefully going to switch their cameras on now. I don't know if you just want to very quickly introduce yourself. Ayola, do you want to go first? Just talk about your name and your job title and what you do for UK Birmingham.
That's no problem. Hi everyone, my name's Ayola Beckford and I am the Communications and Fundraising Manager at UK Birmingham. Our organisation is a local partner and part of AGK, the National Federation. We operate locally, supporting older people by providing information and advice, health and wellbeing services, and later life planning services so that they can enjoy and make the most of later life.
Brilliant, thank you. And Lina? Oh, I think you're on mute.
Yes,
Lina.
I'm still, sorry, I was still on mute.
It's all right, don't worry.
My name is Lina Artunduaga. I'm the fundraising business development manager at PACT, Parents and Children Together. And what we do is building and strengthening families, and we do that through adoption and adoption support services of vulnerable children. And we also have community projects operating mainly in Berkshire in the Thames Valley, one for children and parents who have been victims of domestic abuse, Bounce Back for Kids, and Alana House for women with complex needs, mainly female offenders. So in everything that we do is in order to prevent adoption happening in the first place. So that's what we do.
Brilliant. Thank you so much for those introductions. And the reason why Lina and Ayola are with us today is to talk about their perspective around case for support. And just to give you some background, so Lina from the organisation she works for, PACT, came actually to More Kingston Smith, so came to Dan and I because they felt that they needed to refresh their case for support. So Lina, it'd be interesting to get your take on why you felt that the case at PACT needed to be refreshed.
Absolutely. So we do have rather structure in, I would say, successful fundraising program or trust fundraising program. So when it comes to discrete asks, we are successful. We kind of know what we're doing, but when articulating the work of the organization as a whole, we had a lot of issues, and that was the main ask that's what we needed to work with More Kingston Smith, just to help us articulate that message, particularly for the unrestricted giving and for core costs and the organization as a whole. So how to communicate all the strands of work in a consistent and effective way, and that's when we came to we commissioned consulting, and it was quite enlightening, really, because we have never done these before. We have never consulted, and we have never done something for us in terms of a case for support. And the help, it made the case for support more consistent, more concise as well. We realized that it was very wordy, and it was going through the branches basically, and not really, it was not as compelling as it could be. And also something that Dan mentioned that it was crucial to us was testing the case for support. And I suppose that you could do that anyway, but when you don't have the experience, it's not as easy. And having a third party, a completely detached, emotionally and personally team helping us testing the case for support with supporters and with key, mainly with key supporters, was really, really good and really enriched the case for support, because we got a lot of insight and a lot of honest, sometimes brutally honest opinions on it. So it was something that definitely we could have done ourselves, but we would have needed a lot more trial and error, and it was a very good guidance, and almost like holding our hand as into how to communicate properly what we do. And I think that was our experience, and it was a very successful one, I would say.
And it's good that you picked up on a point around testing as well, because Dan relayed to that in his presentation, but just it's really important to kind of test that case and make sure it resonates with various different stakeholders. Thank you. And I know, Ayola, you have come from it from a slightly different kind of tact, in terms of you were at Age UK Birmingham, and I know fundraising there is quite a new venture for the charity, and I know you were tasked with looking at compiling a case really from scratch for your Christmas appeal last year. And it'd be interesting to know how you approach structuring that case from scratch. How did you start that?
I think with your support, as you mentioned, fundraising is fairly new to the organisation. So it was sort of understanding what the overall aim and objective is, and then looking at who our audience was and identifying what the need was. And I think Dan mentioned it earlier in terms of keeping things simple. There's so many other strands to the type of work that we do and the delivery and the impact that we can make, but to have a clear focus and to keep it very simple and streamlined in terms of what we're asking for and what type of support is required, that was key. And then kind of just looking at our proposition, so looking at analysing what the need was, what our solution would be, the environment. We were fundraising at a time where the messaging had changed slightly. So we did a COVID emergency appeal earlier on in the year, and then in December it was more so about supporting older people, particularly through loneliness and isolation, as the gap had widened. So our messaging was slightly different, and I think that myself being in a fortunate position where I am looking after the communication side as well as fundraising, having that sweet spot in the middle where there was that overlap and hybrid of the message and the fundraising message and the brand messaging, being able to really identify what it was that we were asking for.
Great, thank you. And I guess it would be just interesting to know it from your perspective, you know, for others out there, if they were, you know, just starting to think about either establishing a new case or refreshing a case for support, where would you suggest they sort of start, given both your experience?
I think to have a look at what you'd done previously, what worked, that, you know, it's been mentioned a number of times, having a review and just looking at what worked well, what didn't work, and where you see that you could improve. Looking at the landscape and doing a bit of an evaluation of what's happening around you as well. There's so many, there's, I say distractions, but there's a lot of noise in terms of competing for supporters' attention, not just through charities and us fundraising, but everything else that's happening as well. So just doing an evaluation of that, and then looking at what the ask is and just making that as simple and as accessible as possible, because it strengthens your position. Great. I think.
Thank you, really good advice. And Lina, have you got anything to add to that?
Something that Ayola mentioned as well at the beginning is really understanding your audiences and the nuances of the case for support and how do you need to tweak it and tailor it, and having that ready to go for your audiences, and the message will not resonate with everyone. The same message will not resonate with everyone. So you really have to take the time to understand who your supporters are, and then just make the message effective to them, as opposed to just emulate other things or just do the generic thing that you see out there. I think that yields more, it's more effective. And also I would say that, for instance, for us, not being shy about the financial situation, not so much as the ask, but as the financial situation. For example, we have contracted income, and we always try about, we're very shy and we're very self-conscious about mentioning that. And some of the things that we did with our case for support was putting it out there at the beginning. This is the amount that we receive through contracted income, but we need philanthropic income to maximize the outcomes of that money, and just to get the bigger bang for the buck of every other investment, whereas it's statutory or any other kind. And I think having that clarity and that transparency is really good, instead of just being shy in about it.
Great, thank you.
If I can jump in there, Emma, I think Lina's point there is something that I see in a number of charities, that they don't often, or they don't always tell their prospective donors what the financial gap is between what they have and what they need. They may go to lots of lengths to talk about the good things they do, and that it's important to support them, but they don't necessarily show them that they have a gap. And often charities will talk in terms which make them look and sound quite successful, and indeed they are successful, but it makes the donors or potential donors not actually realize that they do have a financial need, because they sound as if they're already successful, and there aren't any gaps between what they have in resources and what they'd like to be able to do. And so being able to, like with PACT, to say this, you know, PACT is has this turnover, but in order to, and we PACT generates this amount of money towards that turnover, but there's a gap of so many £1,000, hundreds of thousands of pounds, and without that we're not able to do X, Y, and Z. Then that then becomes a compelling case of support, and people can see where their donation fits into that and how their donation makes a difference. I see RG has asked a question in the chat, talking about how you keep it simple, and some of that keeping it simple is focusing around what your financial needs are, but even at that given moment in time, and how donors can potentially solve that. So as you said, Emma, it's not, the problem isn't that you don't have the money, but you need to be clear about what having the money would, and what sort of money you need in order to solve your beneficiaries' problems.
That probably puts us nicely into the Q&A section, actually, given that you've just answered the first question, Dan. So thank you, Lina and Ayola, for your great feedback there. It's really insightful.
If you want to jump in with any of the questions as well, Lina and Ayola, then that's fine too.
No problem.
So if delegates have any questions that you want to ask any one of us, please do pop that into the chat now, and we can, the Q&A, sorry.
I think Jenny
okay,
from CCT asked the first question about where would you include feedback on impact of your work. So I don't know, you talked a bit about impact earlier, Emma. I don't know whether you want to sort of embellish that a little bit more in where feedback on the impact of your work would perhaps fit into a case of support.
So I think it would fit in terms of just evidencing what you can almost incorporate it in terms of what you've done in the past. So it kind of, in a way, it's kind of proving your worth in a way. So you can kind of talk about, it's almost evidencing what you've done prior to what you're asking for donations for, kind of moving forward. So I think you can include it in terms of talking about what you've done that's been successful, and then in addition why you need the extra funds to make more of an impact, but just focusing on those those outputs are really important, so that you're actually, there's proof there that it is actually working, rather than the number of people that you're, if it's, it's a charity, around the number of people you're supporting. It's not about the numbers, it's about the difference you've made to those people, if that's relevant.
I think maybe there's something around the endorsements that maybe Jenny is alluding to there as well, that what people say about your impact that you make, and it's good to include sort of third-party endorsements within your cases of support. Naturally, you as a charity will say that you do good things, but if other people say you do good things as well, and they don't need to say that, then that can make a stronger message. I don't know whether Lina or Ayola, whether that's something you've done in Impact or Age UK particularly.
Not at the moment, but it is something that we've considered doing moving forward. Sorry, Lina.
No, don't worry. And we have, so for instance, when we, in our case for support for Lina House or Women's Community Project, we have we won an award from the Howard League, award, which is an organization fighting for criminal justice. So we have like a really good quote about the evaluation systems of a Lina House and what the judging panel said about it. So we include that in the case for support, and it's quite effective, I would say.
I think you've won a Queen's Award as well, haven't you? Which
yes.
It's a good thing to endorse your charity as well. So yeah,
I was going to say, Jane's asked a question around, would you use case studies to illustrate your point? I'd say absolutely. People always remember stories, so definitely if you've got some compelling case studies, include it. And it's best practice within your charities to make sure you're capturing those case studies as well, so you have processes in place to make sure that those gems, those stories do get kept, so that you can relay that, and that's around telling other people about what your charity do in a really compelling way, because it's a human story. So yeah, case studies is definitely important.
Yeah, some people will respond to statistics, but many more respond to the stories. got a couple of other questions in the Q&A. Let me see. I'm just trying to. There's one about how do you go about streamlining the fundraising message for an organisation that does lots of things, adult daycare, ALD group, creche, befriending, transport services, meals. There is a golden thread there focusing on the vulnerable in the community, but it's ultimately for everyone. I mean, to some extent, Age UK is a bit like that, Ayola. I see you sort of nodding there. Do you have any initial thoughts you want to throw in?
Yeah, I think for the Christmas campaign, we were in a similar position in that we do have so many other services that do require additional support. But we decided to look at, again, like as I'd mentioned earlier, our main objective for that campaign, which was to raise awareness about loneliness and isolation. And underneath that umbrella, there were a number of services that could benefit from that. And so what we did was use a case study to highlight the impact that we've had previously in terms of supporting older people, but also looking at, I guess, constructing our messages quite well. So when we were asking for donations, we were able to say, you know, £10, if you donate £10, this could support this, the delivery of this service, or £20 could support this, 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 and this. And we just made that very clear. And so it meant that whoever was supporting us and however much they wanted to donate, they were contributing to an element of us being able to deliver that service and deliver it well. I hope that makes sense.
Perfectly, yeah. Thank you. I can see that there's some other questions which are sort of Suzanne in the chat and Anonymous have asked sort of about different messages for different audiences, or do you need separate project cases, or can they be part of one larger case? So having different messages, different types of communication around your case studies. And this was something that we worked on at PACT, Lina. I think with some of your trustees, helping them to present the case of support, and for some of those trustees, there were particular issues that PACT did that they found resonated with them more than others, and so which they felt they could talk to their peers and talk to their contacts about better. So we created the general case of support, which articulates the good things that PACT does, why that's important, and what the financial ask was. But we also came up with some shorter sort of elevator pitches around specific issues or specific audiences, maybe a corporate audience or an audience just in Berkshire rather than further afield than that, or talking to people involved in the Church of England, which was where PACT originated from back 70, 80 years ago. And that was one way that, yes, you can come up with several different stories which all stem from the same place. You need to understand the case at the beginning, but it's possible to weave off different stories. And if they go to different audiences, it doesn't necessarily make it more confusing, because those different audiences will only hear the one message, so they won't be confused. You just need to track what you're doing externally. I don't know if you want to add any more to that, Lina.
Say the same. It sounds like it's a lot of work, and then you need 70 cases for support, but it's not. You really, once you have your audiences, you will have 5 tops. You know the groups, and when you have done that work, and then you just know the message, how to tweak it. And what I always, what the support, the advice that we received, and what we always is just, I think A/B testing is great. So you test and you test until you refine your message to the point that is effective and it gets to where you want it to be.
Right.
And then we're almost at time, and I see we've got one more question from Peter from Hope in Community Barnsley, talking about impact. Is there an easier way to identify impact? I think some of the things that both Ayola and Lina have talked about in terms of case studies is perhaps a way to start on that. and really thinking about impact, it's thinking about what changes as a result of what your charity does. How do your beneficiaries change? How does life improve for them? And so a case study can be a simple way to do that if you don't have much track record and you don't have much infrastructure as a charity. I see your charity only started last year, so it's very new, Peter. So a way to start would be thinking about some case studies, and then that would help you to start to build up a little bit of a model of what happens, to, what difference your charity makes, what your sort of model of change is, and then you can start to think about getting some data to back that up as well, and then ways of understanding and monitoring and evaluating that data moving forwards. But to start off with some stories might be a good way to get into that. Or Amy Ingram's just put in one last one, because we will have to close momentarily, but we're updating our case of support. If you have any advice on communicating the updates, trying to be more strategic in outputs with these themes. I think just very briefly, just do communicate, let people know, don't hold back, don't be shy. Involve as many people, don't keep it to yourself in the fundraising team. It's the case of support is for everyone, and you need to make the most of it and use that as an opportunity. Lina was talking about testing. Testing your case of support is also an opportunity to ask people to support you in a sort of under the guise of testing. So yeah, use every opportunity to get the message out there, even if you're just asking for advice, because you never know, some funds may come from that.
Can I add to that as well, Dan? Using like staff and volunteers, as well as you'd mentioned earlier, that really helped us with our Christmas campaign, because they already had buy-in and wanted to support. So that can help to spread your message further.
And I think just being open about why you're changing your tact as well, and why, you know, it's an improvement to your service is important too.
Okay, it's just tipped over 5 o'clock, so we will stop now, because we like to be prompt if we can on finishing. Thank you very much,
thank you,
Lina and Ayola,
so
for joining us and for your insights.
Yes, thanks for having us.
That's been great, and thank you everyone for listening. And don't forget to fill in the questionnaire when you come out of Zoom to tell us what you think about this. And look for the different things that we're offering with the presentation when it gets sent around to you by email. So thank you very much.
Thank you.